Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by the McCune Charitable Foundation. And viewers like you.
This week on New Mexico in Focus, 2 New Mexico pueblos are suing the feds over a Trump-era water rule that sets aside pollution regulations.
Really what it's about is protecting your water and mine. Water's in the Jemez River, water's in the Rio Grande. And we have so little water in New Mexico.
And Senator Ben Ray Lujan joins us from Washington to talk about boosting broadband internet access. New Mexico in Focus starts now. Thanks for joining us this week. I'm your host, Gene Grant. We have those 2 really meaty interviews this week. And as with everything on the show, if you miss it, you can watch on our New Mexico in Focus YouTube channel. The Line Opinion panel is here too, and we'll dig into 2 big topics this week, including the special election and how voters are, or in some cases are not, casting their ballots. The Albuquerque Journal reported this week that Democrats are showing up in far greater numbers than Republicans for early voting, but only a small percentage of people have voted so far. We begin with the issue that's on everyone's mind and not necessarily their face. Here's the line. State officials wasted no time in responding to the new mask recommendations from the Centers for Disease Control on Friday of last week. Health Secretary Tracy Collins updated the public health order to remove the mask requirement for people who are fully vaccinated in all but a very few scenarios. Businesses have now responded, with companies like Target and Walmart removing their mask requirements as well. I think Smith's is in there too. But of course, schools will continue to require face coverings for the remainder of this year. So here to talk about what it all means are this week's Line Opinion panelists. We welcome back Dede Feldman, a Line regular and former state senator. Also with us this week, Crystal Ciarza of Ciarza Digital. And returning to the panel this week is Dave Mulryan from the group Everybody Votes. Welcome to you all. I just want to start by going around the table, get your personal observations. Have you seen a major decline in the use of masks since the public health order was changed as you go about your daily lives? Dede, let me start with you.
Well, I do see many more unmasked people. But yesterday I drove through Corrales and stopped there at Flying Star, and almost everyone was wearing masks. So I think it's very mixed. And of course, I don't see inside of places, which is what I think the concern is. But outdoors, even outdoors, people are still wearing their masks.
Mm-hmm. David, what about you? You've been out and about. What have you been seeing out there?
You know, I was actually surprised by the number of people that continue to wear masks. Mm-hmm. And listen, I'm a proponent. I mean, you know, there's this idea in healthcare where you have harm reduction. And if you can wear a mask, and even if you're vaccinated, you know, we don't know what the variants are, where they're coming from. And, you know, as my mother was always fond of saying, don't ask for trouble because you'll get it. And, you know, the mask to me is not that big of a deal to continue wearing it. I noticed at the gym that you don't have to wear the mask, but any number of people were wearing it. But of course, you know, the irony is the people who are going to be conscientious and wear the mask are probably the people who are also vaccinated. And so, you know, look, I was a teenage boy once. I thought nothing could happen to me. And right. I was out running around doing things that you do when you're that age. So but again, to me, that just says I can only take care of what I can do. I'm going to keep wearing the mask. And plus it hides my neck. What can I say?
We all have our reasons. You're allowed.
Yes.
Crystal, you know, you travel in a lot of circles out there, business, public, private. What's the last couple of weeks been like for you on the mask?
It's been very interesting. So from the social sports side, golfers are definitely not wearing masks out there just because of the open air. But when you're in the bar or having a couple drinks, you see that. You know, definitely the city courses, the great city courses in Albuquerque, and some of the private clubs have definitely been enforcing those mask rules. Mm-hmm. Whenever, you know, our kickball is going to start coming up here pretty soon, and definitely close contact. And a big part is the fact that it's hard to even compete in sports with masks. So that's a big thing. I had a really, really interesting conversation with my leadership group and a leadership group of other business owners. And though we try to keep things very confidential, I can tell you that a lot of us are still a little confused on what are we supposed to do to protect our employees? How do we help our customers? Have we seen areas of business that are super flexible? How are they defying or accidentally defying the governor's orders? So at this point, I think it's clarity that is not quite out in the community from an administrative perspective or operational intentions. So that's what's been really confusing about the mask part. But I think if I was to, take the personal approach, like I think about my mom, my mom is a pancreatic cancer survivor, and she was one of the first people to get the vaccine back in February. And, back then she would say, it seems really ridiculous that I have to wear a mask in 2019 to jump on an airplane to travel internationally. But now I feel like everybody's starting to look like me when it comes to flights. And so I'm with Dave and I'm with Dee Dee, like whatever's most comfortable for the individual is the right choice.
Good stuff there. Dee Dee, I got a question about the governor. A lot of people were surprised, I think, by the state's move to lose the mask mandate after, they held a hard line in terms of many other aspects of the public health order. Does this prove what the governor has been saying all along, that she is following the science, or would she have been better off waiting to ditch the masks until we reach that magical 60% vaccination statewide, which she had been touting earlier?
Well, it did seem like a really quick turnaround, just in response to the CDC guidelines, which were also introduced changed quite quickly.
True.
And I think that, I think that she could have waited a little bit and stuck with the program that we were doing. I would have been more comfortable if she waited until maybe mid-June, which would have been accelerating the timeline a little bit.
Senator, I got to ask you, Senator, is that politically possible? That she could have waited until mid-June with the rest of the country flinging off masks? Would that have held?
Well, I think that it's all in the details. I mean, where are about the indoor spaces, and where are masks still required, and who is enforcing the mandates? Now businesses must determine who is unvaccinated and who is vaccinated. And the honor system. Well, this is like falling back on the honor system. And the honor system, usually requires trust. And what we've been seeing is an erosion of trust in all institutions and in one another. And now, we could see who was wearing a mask and who wasn't wearing a mask before. But now we don't know whether those people who are unmasked are vaccinated or not, and that creates a little bit of uncertainty.
I like that last bit. It is uncertain with that idea, David. When you think about this, does this change ramp up the rhetoric? Do you think, or is it the vitriol that we're going through now about masks will actually tamp down as one less thing about the state's COVID response for some people? What's your sense of it?
My sense is a couple of things. One, I think that the CDC, I think they were premature, but I don't happen to have a PhD in biochemistry, so I'll let the decision to them. But I also think that the politicians, and not just the governor, but politicians in general, the mask became a metaphor for how we were in this epidemic. And somehow removing the mask is meant to make people feel better. We've attained a big goal. I mean, New Mexico has done a great job. We are #1 in terms of getting people vaccinated. So I think that, and also I believe there is governor to governor peer pressure. If one state is going to do it, then they feel like they have to do it. California has said they're not doing the mask mandate or dropping the mask mandate until mid-June. And they got quite a bit of pushback. It's like, well, we want to get rid of the mask right now. And so I don't know. I'm going to continue to use the mask. I would encourage people to use the mask. I mean, the thing that always caught my attention, this is very strange. We basically had no flu season because people were busy wearing masks. So you have to say to yourself, okay, so I'll just wear a mask, and I'm a person in China in the 1970s and 80s, and I'm wearing a mask for smog, but that kind of really has to get your attention. We simply eliminated the flu because people were masked, and of course they weren't getting together in all sorts of groups, but you have to say that can't be a bad thing, right?
That's a good point there. Crystal, related to the mask mandate, of course, is vaccinations. We got to talk about that. UNM, as you know, released a proposed policy a little while back, and it's taking feedback right now, but the draft proposal would require full vaccination for those returning to campus, with few exceptions, of course. Lots of places will be weighing their options here, but what do you think about that idea? Is it the best way to go moving forward?
I'm not an administrator, so I'm not going to even pretend to answer that question correctly. But I will tell you a scenario that actually happened to one of the CRC Social Digital clients about 2 years ago. Was Lewis University had actually canceled graduation at main campus because of I believe, a measles outbreak. And I'm sorry, mumps, a mumps outbreak. Okay. And the mumps outbreak was because of poor vaccination records on the education front or on the administrative front, the close proximity to the area. And at first, back in 2018, 2019, when we heard of a mumps outbreak, we were going, what? A mumps for 20 to 21-year-olds? And this was it. And Lewis University was, of course, in Romeoville, Illinois. And then here we are now asking ourselves, is UNM going to be requiring vaccination records? But if I'm not mistaken, every school, every private institution that I've ever enrolled my son in, they always ask for vaccination records for the safety and security of the students. So, if UNM decides to make a mandate like that, obviously the intention is to not disrupt the educational process because of human choice. It's obviously to keep everybody safe, keep everybody healthy, keep the college university experience the same. And so if they decide to go through a decision like that, it's not uncommon. And like I said, the case in point with Lewis University in Romeoville, Illinois. So,
Dee Dee, do you have a thought on that, Senator? Interesting point Crystal just made.
I think that colleges and universities all over the country are considering this now. And they have a recommendation from the American Health Association that it should be a requirement come the fall for colleges to get back into full swing. And I think that, like, for example, the University of Colorado system is doing it. I know Fort Lewis College is doing it. I know the University of California schools and the University of Pennsylvania also, my alma mater, requires those vaccinations. Of course, there are always waivers, if you have a medical condition, and even if you have a religious exemption, I think, Crystal, that was probably true. It's true in elementary school as well. So I think that it probably, would be a wise thing to do, although I think it would be kind of controversial. And once again, who enforces all this stuff?
Thank you. Yep, exactly right. Dave, I'm going to give you 20 seconds for a last word on that question.
I mean, look, let me sum it up. Vax or die. I think people should be vaccinated. I think institutions that are in a position to help us get more people vaccinated should do so. I mean, it's clear the vaccines work. We've seen this dramatic drop in cases. So sure, get the vaccination, require the vaccination. You're helping yourself and you're helping everyone around you.
There you go. The conversation on masks and vaccination requirements continues online. Join us on Facebook or our Facebook page, Focus on New Mexico, and share your thoughts on the issue. We're back in a bit to discuss the special election in the 1st Congressional District and start of same-day voter registration here in New Mexico.
We go fishing, and the fish that we catch in the Jemez River is what we eat. One other important factor is that the water in the Jemez River is used in ceremonies, and this is a threat to our way of life.
Ben Ray Lujan is coming up on his 5-month anniversary as New Mexico's junior senator. He walked into a razor-thin majority for Democrats in the U.S. Senate, with the vice president able to cast a tie-breaking vote. The senator brings some of his House of Representatives priorities with him, as well as taking on broader issues such as immigration. Here's NMAF correspondent Russell Contreras, who spoke with the senator this week.
Senator Ben Ray Lujan, thank you for joining us on New Mexico in Focus. We really appreciate it.
Always an honor, Russ. Good to be with you today.
So you've been in office just a few months now. What's the difference between the Senate and the House after a decade in the House and some years in House leadership? Are you familiarizing yourself with the new body? How's it going?
Well, Russ, there are a lot of similarities. You have to get to know your colleagues, make sure you meet them one-on-one and get a chance to work with them and their teams. And that's something I've appreciated. even with colleagues where we may have had some disagreements in committee and had different approaches to getting to the same goal. Afterwards, I've had the honor of sitting down and talking to my colleagues and make sure that we're on a good path and that we're able to continue to working together. There are different rules of engagement, if you will. There's different procedures and rules that govern both bodies. And so that's been something that I've been spending time learning and understanding, but have very much appreciated the support I've received from my colleagues and the votes that we've been able to earn to pass important pieces of legislation, including directing $17 billion to the Department of Energy National Labs for the Science and Tech Directorate recently. So again, very much appreciate getting a chance to meet people, work with people, and make a difference for the people of New Mexico.
Senator, when you and I last spoke, you made it very clear you wanted to reach across the aisle with Republicans to work on various proposals. You and GOP Senator Rick Scott of Florida are working on a law called the Rider Act that attempts to attack drunken driving. Tell us about that law.
The Reduce Impaired Driving for Everyone Act, the RIDE Act, that I have the honor of working with Senator Scott with, is a piece of legislation that was also championed by our very own senator in New Mexico, Tom Udall. Russ, it's a story that I don't share often, and now that we're working on this legislation, I've been talking about it more. About 29 years ago, less than half a mile from my home in Nambe, I was driving home one night and a drunk driver hit me head on. And I'm fortunate that I'm here to tell that story and to talk about it today. For a long time, all I would see was the headlights coming right at me. Anytime I closed my eyes, whether it was day or night. And too many families have been lost. So many families that have been victims of drunk drivers on the wrong side of the road, which is what happened to me on that state road in Nambe, but even on interstates. And we recently lost some loved ones in New Mexico, and it happens across America every day. This piece of legislation, which requires auto manufacturers to include readily available technology to prevent and stop drunk driving accidents across America. It's something that we're growing more and more momentum with. There's strong bipartisan support. Even my colleagues from Michigan now have become co-sponsors and have been advocating for the legislation. I just jumped off of a hearing in the Commerce Committee as well, where part of my line of questioning was about getting support for the RIDE Act. Again, this is readily available technology. It will save people's lives. It's common sense. And here's what sums it up, Russ. If auto manufacturers across America are asking for waivers to liability for self-driving, fully automated self-driving cars, why can't they include this technology? There should not be a reluctance. And I'm going to keep pushing until we get this done.
You ran on the environment during your campaign. And as of right now, the Tularosa downwinders from the Trinity test, the world's first atomic bomb test, haven't been included in the Radiation Compensation Act. That law is set to sunset next year. What are the chances of extending that law and including folks from Tularosa and Mescalero Apache?
I'm working diligently to get the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act extended, which expires at the end of 2022. And Russ, you point out something that no one has been able to give me a good answer with why the people of Tularosa, where the first bomb was tested with the Trinity test site on American soil, when other counties across America have been included as downwind of where nuclear testing took place, how can it be that two communities, especially in New Mexico, in Tularosa and out in Church Rock in McKinley County, that where the berm broke back in 1979 and those uranium tailings went flooding into arroyos, contaminating streams and arroyos and waterways, sheep and cattle and people, how could they be left out? Open uranium pit mining in around Laguna, Acoma, Pueblos as well. How are they not included? So I've been raising this issue with my colleagues. At the very least, this program needs to be extended, number one. There should be an apology issued by the United States. And I was able to get that included in the House National Defense Authorization Act, but it didn't make it through the Senate Conference Committee. Now I'm in the Senate, and I'm going to work diligently to get that done. and include as many provisions as we can with RECA. I'll never forget the voice of an elder Navajo woman who testified here in Washington, D.C. on the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, Russ. And she asked members of Congress, are you all waiting for us to die so the problem goes away? Think about how profound that is. And we've lost loved ones through the last many months and years. It's not right. This is a liability for the United States of America, and the United States needs to do right by every uranium miner that was not included in the original RECA, and for all the communities that were excluded from downwind status that should have been included from the very beginning.
New Mexico is a state that continues to struggle with poverty. You and I have talked about that in the past. Your staff and your colleagues say, if you talk to Senator Lujan, he will talk your ear off about broadband. You believe that broadband could be the center of connecting New Mexico and improving this economy. Why is broadband connection so important to you?
Well, there are many programs and projects and legislative initiatives that have to be adopted to address poverty throughout New Mexico and across America. One of those that was included recently was the expansion of the child tax credit, which families are slated to start to see in their bank accounts now in July. That is important, and we're working to make that permanent. That's number one. But broadband, I really think this is a game changer, Russ, for so many parts of the United States, and especially New Mexico, that are not connected with fast, affordable internet. So many of us know the difference between slow internet, fast internet, or no internet. And it's simply unacceptable. When you can get on an airplane and stay connected at 30,000 feet and fly across America, connected to the internet at faster speeds than you can in communities that you're flying above, or even at the International Space Station, we in the United States can solve this problem. And that's why I've been working diligently to include robust funding for broadband in the infrastructure package that is coming up. President Biden has included it in his proposal with the American Jobs Plan as well, that he presented to the United States Senate and to the U.S. House of Representatives. I'm working on several legislative initiatives. And I'm also proud to chair the subcommittee that has jurisdiction over broadband deployment, the FCC as well, Russ. So right now we're able to lift up people's voices across New Mexico to make sure we're not left out. And here's what it comes down to. There's a sophomore that attends Cuba High School. Her name's Helene. She lives out in Counselor, New Mexico. She's Navajo. She does not have electricity at her home. She does not have a broadband connection. She depends on a wireless phone, but that wireless phone has fixed caps on data. And so the family's very weary about using that phone too much so she has enough bandwidth to do her homework. It takes her almost 2 hours to get to school every day. If we can do right by Helene, get Wi-Fi on her school bus, make sure she has a connection at home, that she doesn't have data caps subjected to her mobile device, and we can get her electricity, running water, and wastewater, then we're doing right. And so I'm looking at this through the lens of what I've learned from Helene, this very brave 16-year-old girl, a sophomore, right from New Mexico, that has participated in hearings and testimony already. And that is a voice that we need to continue to lift up and learn from.
Now, the Democrats have a tiny majority in the Senate, and many of the progressive wish list items coming from the House won't make it through this divided body. As we talk right now, Senator Tim Scott, we mentioned earlier, is working on a comprehensive police reform bill. It's in negotiations right now. For this to pass muster for you, what would you like to see in that package?
Look, I think that there is progress being made from Senator Booker working with Senator Tim Scott, as well as Karen Bass, who's the former chair of the Congressional Black Caucus and still a member of the House of Representatives as well. I just talked to both Senator Booker and to Karen about progress they're making, and I need to check in with Senator Scott. But I was optimistic with what they shared with me. Look, we want to make sure that we're bringing attention to the injustices in our communities and that we're able to implement a policy that we can get support and get signed into law. And I think that's what Corey and Tim are trying to get done in the Senate with the support of Karen. I proudly supported legislation in the past, Russ, out of the House with the George Floyd Policing Act. It's a piece of legislation that also already passed the House of Representatives. And that framework is something that's important for us to be considering and looking at as we're able to make these changes, some of which are already adopted in New Mexico. So again, looking to see what Corey and Tim and and Karen will come up with, but we trust them to come up with a strong package. And I just appreciate them willing to work together across the aisle for the good of America.
Same could also be said about immigration reform. It's something we've been trying to pass for 2 decades now. Are you optimistic that we could get something through the Senate by 2022?
Russ, I'm optimistic, but it comes with this. It's clear to me that many of my Republican colleagues have chosen to make this political with immigration reform. And it's not in the interest of folks that want to use this as a wedge issue to try to solve the problem. Where I am encouraged are several of my Republican colleagues have been willing to sit down on a bipartisan basis to be able to find ideas and solutions. And I'm hoping that more members in the House and in the Senate, Democratic and Republican, take a look at members that are trying to solve this problem. The Dream and Promise Act already passed the House of Representatives again this year with the bipartisan support, Democratic and Republican members supporting it. The Farm Worker Modernization Act passed with 30 Republicans in the House supporting it. There's no question that they have the votes to pass here in the Senate. And I've been continuing to raise this issue, not just with the White House, personally meeting with fellow Congressional Hispanic Caucus colleagues in the Oval Office with the President and the Vice President, as well as my Senate colleagues. We meet on a weekly basis, if not a couple times a week, and there's a bipartisan group where we've been getting together to try to grow more support. So I am optimistic that we can get something done. We must get something done. It's not just good for America, this is good for our economy as well. And it will keep people safer, make people safer. It'll treat people with dignity and respect. And again, it's going to be a critical component of growing our economy and our GDP.
And finally, the few seconds we have with you left here, Mr. Senator, the Senate sometimes can be a place where you go and where dreams die. You see the polarization, but you see a lot of collegiality. As you've spent time in the Senate just these past few weeks, are you more optimistic about America, or have you turned more pessimistic?
I'm always optimistic, Russ. Look, I think that people want to solve problems and get things done. In my experience in the Senate, the example that I shared with you, as we're working together on a bipartisan bill to increase America's competitiveness, we just saw an announcement by Intel with a $3.5 billion investment in the New Mexico facility out in Rio Rancho. We need to be aggressive when it comes to chip manufacturing and advances with space and other science and tech directorate and research. I was able to pass an amendment that invested and authorized $17 billion to the Department of Energy. Our national labs in New Mexico will benefit, Los Alamos and Sandia, with the research that they are doing. And I did this with strong bipartisan support. I actually had one more, I believe, Republican vote in committee than I did a Democratic vote. And we're now bringing this to the floor. We'll be passing this legislation next week out of the United States Senate. That's just one example where we can come together to respond to competitiveness challenges, especially with the Chinese government, with what they have been doing, and to make sure the United States is going to continue to be a leader in the world when it comes to these spaces. That's just one example. Even when there was disagreement and my Republican colleagues, not a one supported the American Rescue Plan, what we saw was we were still able to come together to be able to respond to America's needs and to pass a package that provided more financial support into the pockets of hardworking middle-class Americans, and to make sure that we had vaccine to get into people's arms. That's another example of how we can work together and we can still work on policy, some of which were Republican ideas that were included in that package. Unfortunately, they didn't vote for the final package, but they helped to shape it. That's a positive response, and it shows me that we can respond, we can work together, and we can continue to work to bring the country together.
And finally, I know you've only been there a few months, but are you running for re-election?
Russ, I'm just getting started here with working with my colleagues and reaching out to fellow New Mexicans, and just give me a chance here. We're still 5 years away, and if the people of New Mexico encourage me to continue to work on their behalf, it's definitely a responsibility I'll continue to embrace. There's a whole lot more that I have to learn from fellow New Mexicans, solve these challenges and problems. But right now we're working diligently to get infrastructure investments back home, to close this broadband gap, and to create more job opportunities. So the more announcements that we have, the more build out that we have, the better New Mexico will be. And it's really a responsibility from all of us. You know, what I always remind folks back home, and I've learned from my colleagues, namely Senator Cory Booker, he reminds us that change does not come from Washington, D.C. Change comes to Washington, D.C. from across America. And it's our responsibility to carry those voices. So continue to be proud to represent the people of New Mexico, and now be one of only 4 Democratic Hispanic senators in the Senate, building off that work and that legacy brought to us by one of our very own, Dennis Chavez, who did incredible work and always fought for the underdog, but drove investments into New Mexico. And so I'm learning about him every day as well, and making sure that I'm able to live up to the expectations that he set forth for not just our state, but for us to deliver for the people back home.
Senator Ben Ray Lujan, when you're ready to make that announcement, we'll be ready here at New Mexico in Focus. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Russ. Always an honor, sir.
Voting is already underway in the race to replace Deb Haaland in the U.S. House of Representatives, and the special election is also on the debut of the same-day voter registration here in New Mexico. Lawmakers approved the practice in 2019, but it's being rolled out earlier than expected because of Ms. Haaland's appointment as Secretary of the Interior early this year, as you remember. We have interviews with all the major party candidates up on our website at newmexicoinfocus.org. But let's start here, as many states, including Georgia and Arizona, are looking to restrict voting access in the wake of the 2020 election. We seem to be headed in the other direction here in New Mexico, as this same-day voter registration shows. Dee Dee Feldman, State Senator, what do you think is behind that? Why are we so different?
Well, New Mexico has always been very progressive when it comes to voting rights and voting access. Not only are we moving toward same-day registration, but we have online voter registration. We have a very expansive early voting period. Some states only have 3 days, and they're trying to restrict it. We have voting convenience centers, where you can go anywhere in Albuquerque and get a ballot particular to you, and that makes it very convenient. And we've done a lot of other things to make voting more accessible to everyone. We have used drop boxes out in rural areas where the mail is uncertain. But this time we had a special session of the legislature, and county clerks were allowed to mail absentee applications to voters, so that they didn't have to endanger their health by going to the polling places. So we've had a very progressive record here. We were one of the first states to go back to paper ballots. Right. So it's not just in expanding the franchise. We're also tops in securing the elections. And after the 2000 elections and widespread doubt about the machines, at that time we said we're gonna spend the money and we're gonna go back to paper ballots so we can verify these things. And we have. So I'm proud of our Secretary of State right now. But the ones that came before her too have consistently made it easier to vote.
Good stuff.
And
there.
The legislature sometimes has opposed that.
That's
I mean,
a good
they
point.
have tried to block it, but they have continued.
That's a good point there. I'm glad you got that in. David, when you think about it, I mean, it used to be the Saturday before Election Day, you could either change your registration or register to vote. Now it's right up to Election Day. You can walk into the place, sign up, bring your paperwork, do whatever you need to do, and you can vote that day and get registered that day and vote. It's a huge change when you think about it.
Yeah. It's a huge change, but also I think credit where credit is due. We have politicians from both sides of the aisle. We have had political will in this state that has said voting is important. We should make it accessible. We've had Spanish language ballots. Do not underestimate the ability of people like Daniel Ivey Soto has been a tremendous, he's written the legislation. They tend to always get it right. But also I think that there's something in the air that says voting is important. important. We need to get everybody registered. We want them to vote. And I think you have to credit, the county clerks all over the state have been tremendously helpful in making sure that everybody knows, come to my office and I'll register you to vote. There's been a lot of groups that have run around and registered voters. I've got teachers at high schools who make it their mission to make sure that their kids are registered to vote when they turn 18 or when they turn 17, that they could do it. So, I mean, it's a lot of individuals that have collectively said, we like voting, we think voting is important. Do not underestimate the psychology of voting is a good thing. And I think, and honestly, I'm going to tell you that I think the parties in the different states that are trying to limit voting, it's going to backfire, because in some ways they are creating an environment where when you tell people they can't do something, then they immediately want to do it. And I think that restrictive voting is not a good idea.
Good point. I love that. Crystal, we got some insight this week into early voting turnout. Registered Democratic voters outpacing Republican voters by a 2-to-1 margin. In fact, the gap in Democrats voting early is outpacing the registration gap between the two parties. What do you think explains that difference? What is it about Democrats that have embraced early voting, but Republicans still seem to not quite get there with this?
I don't know if it's a matter of whether or not Democrats have embraced early voting. We just have to look at the demographics of the area that CD1 is. I mean, the last time we had somebody in the Republican seat was maybe Heather Wilson in like the early 2000s.
2006.
And so, yeah. And so like, I don't disagree that Democrats are obviously understanding voting rights. Their interpretation of democracy is so different, obviously, from Republicans. That's why we have the two-party system. But at the end of the day, we have to think about what is the population of CD1, and it always skews blue. Like, you can even look to the mayoral races that are not supposed to be partisan. They always skew blue. And so and it's funny too, to kind of go back to the topic that you were talking about voting rights, voter registration, et cetera. My first job was for the New Voters Project, a nonprofit that would register young people to vote. And the conversations that we had back in 2005, yes, I'm that old, that in 2005, when we were registering people to vote at 18 to 21, we would go to places that they would be like Pride or parties or Central, where people would all hang out. The same issues that we're having now are the same issues we had back then. It's access to voting and making sure we register people on time, making sure that they don't need an ID to access a ballot of some sort, understanding what a ballot looks like and how a properly marked circle needs to be counted as a vote.
That's right.
All the issues that we're running into now, it seems like monumental change in New Mexico, but they're changes that have been slowly but surely happening over the last decade or two.
Good point there. Senator, turnout still pretty low overall, about 4% on Monday of this week, which is not unusual for a special, certainly, but has all the rhetoric about voting integrity come home to roost for you? What's going on right now in this moment?
No, I think that we're going to have a low turnout in this election, but the whole story isn't in. There are 15,000 people who have requested absentee ballots and who have not yet voted. So, this is the big trend now that we have seen this year, and that is the huge uptick in the use of absentee ballots. Yes, early voting is important, but what marked this year and what mostly irked the people that lost in these states where they're trying to restrict absentee ballots is the use of absentee ballots. It used to be a Republican thing. Republicans were always better at absentees, and they skewed toward the older voters, the military voters. But now many more people are using them because of the pandemic. And that's a trend that's going to continue. I work part-time for Common Cause New Mexico, and we did a lot of work during the general teaching people how to vote absentee. Because it's different than voting in person, and you can screw up. And what do you do if you screw up? Those are all questions that people had. But I think that we're going to continue to see people want to vote, both Democrats and Republicans. It's the foundation of democracy. And yes, I think people are rebelling when barriers are put up there unnecessarily. It's so obvious to people.
Jean, I do want to ask the question, though, to all of us, like how much of voting turnout is actually because it's not a presidential election year or it's not a gubernatorial? I mean, I don't know what the statistics are, Dee Dee, but I mean, there's got to be something that says like special elections just historically have a low turnout because people forget that there's a turnout.
Absolutely. And I think that you're really lucky if you get a 20% turnout in a special election and also in a mayoral election.
That's right.
It's usually low.
That's right. David, Bernalillo County Clerk Linda Stover told me in a Facebook Live discussion earlier this week on Wednesday that New Mexico has some of the most secure election systems in the country. She mentioned paper ballots that Senator mentioned just a bit ago. Do you think that's the general consensus among voters right now, or?
I mean, I think that the voters are very confident in New Mexico's abilities to handle good elections. And people aren't stupid. I mean, this idea that the election was stolen, going back 6 or 7 months. If you saw what was happening in Arizona, I mean, even the people that were sort of supporting it, they're saying, okay, this is over. We have to do it. You do not want to overplay your hand. I mean, 17,000 different entities touch voting in this country. I mean, the idea that there could be a conspiracy and that you can somehow throw an election, it's not possible. But I will say Linda Stover and Maggie Toulouse Oliver, the Secretary of State, New Mexico has a good reputation for voting because they've worked at it. I mean, when they weren't going to stick with the machines, they said we felt there was some question about whether the machines were safe. They simply pitched it and they said the integrity of these elections are good. They've worked at it. And also I think the state legislature could be a little bit more generous with giving these county clerks more money to run elections and everything. But I also think that the state parties could be a little bit better about saying, I don't care if you're a Democrat or you're a Republican or you're something in between. They need to encourage voting also. We need the entire chorus saying, get out and vote. It is the sort of the dues you pay for living in a democracy. Everybody needs to push voting without a doubt.
Thank you for that, Dave. And that's going to do it for now. But we'd love to hear what you think about early voting and all the opinions you just heard about New Mexico's election system. Just drop us a line on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram by searching for @NewMexicoInFocus. This spring, the Pueblos of Jemez and Laguna sued the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers over a 2020 rule that weakens, or in some cases just gets rid of, protections for ephemeral or intermittent streams under the Federal Clean Water Act. Now, here in New Mexico, that's a big deal. Close to 90% of our waterways fall under those two designations. Correspondent Laura Paskus talks with Cliff Villa at the UNM Law Clinic, which filed the suit, and Chris Toya with the Pueblo of Jemez.
So there's been back and forth for years now about whether or not to protect small waterways under the Clean Water Act. And last summer, the Trump-era rule took effect that essentially the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers will no longer protect certain types of waterways under the Clean Water Act. Now the Pueblos of Laguna and Jemez have filed a lawsuit against the two agencies regarding this rule. Let's start with you, Chris Toya. You're from Jemez Pueblo. Can you talk a little bit about why these ephemeral and intermittent waterways are so important to New Mexicans?
Because we live in the high desert Southwest. 87% of our streams are ephemeral, meaning that during the monsoon season or rainy events or snow melt, these arroyos, drainages get filled with water, and they are tributaries to the main Jemez River, and we use the water for irrigation of our crops, and then it's a means of food supply as well. We go fishing, and the fish that we catch in the Jemez River is what we eat. One other important factor is that the water in the Jemez River is used in ceremonies, and this is a threat to our way of life.
Mm-hmm. Cliff Villa, you worked on this lawsuit through the UNM Law Clinic. Can you talk a little bit about what types of pollution, what types of threats these sorts of waterways are under, and if successful, what this lawsuit would do?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. So through the UNM School of Law Clinic, we have worked with a number of tribes and tribal members for a long time, and we listen to their concerns, and we think about how we might be able to use the law to address those concerns. One of the biggest concerns we've heard recently was concerns about continuing to protect tribal waters under the Clean Water Act. The Clean Water Act is incredibly broad. It basically applies to all pollutants, toxic pollutants, hazardous waste, even in some cases things like dirt or cow manure. And so the threats to New Mexico's waters can come from many different directions, but one of them might be something industrial activity like mining, including uranium mining in the Navajo Nation in the Grants Mine District. There's pumice mining in the Jemez watershed. There's sewage. Raw sewage has been a big problem across the country for a long time. And even things like sediment that might clog up a channel and prevent waters from reaching the communities could be an issue, and is something that is regulated under the Clean Water Act when the Clean Water Act applies. That the problem here is that the Trump rules severely diminish the scope of protection under the Clean Water Act.
So federal administrations have gone back and forth on these protections, and even states have gone back and forth. Under the Martinez administration, the state of New Mexico opposed these protections. Cliff, let's start with you. Can you talk a little bit about why protections under the Clean Water Act would be controversial?
Well, I think part of the controversy is a resistance to federal regulation at all. The Clean Water Act was designed to establish national standards that states would implement, and so there's always been sort of a state component there. I don't think that's been fully understood, but I also think that there's been a lot of misunderstanding about what the Clean Water Act does. One of my favorite examples of misunderstanding was there was a rumor that Obama was attempting to promulgate a rule that would regulate puddles under the Clean Water Act. And so the Obama administration actually went out of its way to write a rule that said this rule does not apply to literally puddles. And the first thing that the Trump administration claimed after Trump came in 2017 was that Obama's rule has been a disaster, he used that word. And he said, in particular, it is regulating puddles. When Obama went out of its way to say, no, the rule doesn't regulate puddles. So there's just been a lot of misunderstanding, misstatements about the Clean Water Act scope. Really what it's about is protecting your water and mine, waters in the Jemez River, waters in the Rio Grande. And we have so little water in New Mexico that we just don't have any to spare. So maybe there are some genuine controversies around the edges of wetlands in the eastern United States, but all the water in New Mexico is needed for purposes here in New Mexico, and particularly for the tribal communities.
Right. Chris Toia, clean water just doesn't seem controversial to me. Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen over the years in terms of, wanting to protect these waters, and in particular tribal waters?
Yes. Throughout the years, I've noticed that, we're getting more and more people, recreationalists in our Jemez Mountains. The Forest Service declared an area up here in the Jemez Mountains a national recreational area, and we're getting people by the thousands. I think annually, this is old data, but they were saying that we get over 1.6 million visitors in our Jemez Mountains, and the largest bottleneck is the Pueblo itself. We're getting so much vehicle traffic on the highway, and it's dangerous for the people. But what people don't realize is that, they're trekking on the roadways, on areas that don't have any paths. You got vehicle traffic, you got foot traffic, and you also got cattle. And so what happens is that, this area start getting eroded. And we've noticed within this past few years, we're just getting so much sediment in our irrigation systems. It's one issue that we're facing. And we're farmers, and we use this water from the Jemez River to irrigate our fields, but we're getting sediment loads that is unbelievable. The other issues is that we need this clean water. As I stated earlier, it's water is life, and water is very crucial in tribal life, especially in ceremonies. We use the water from the Jemez River, water from the springs to conduct ceremonies, not only for ourselves but for the whole world, in a sense, because we're protecting and praying for the balance of Mother Earth. And so when that happens, not only do tribal members benefit, but the whole world benefits.
So lots of different groups have weighed in on this rule on all sides of the issue. Chris, can you talk a little bit about why this lawsuit is so important for the Pueblos in terms of things like jurisdiction and sovereignty?
Yes, currently the Jemez Pueblo reservation is approximately 90,000 acres. We only claim, as far as the boundaries go, a fraction of what our ancestors had used at one time. So much of the ancestral homelands are under the management of the U.S. Forest Service, the Department of Interior, the National Park Service, Bureau of Land Management, and private property. So the watershed, the Jemez watershed, is above the valley of Jemez Pueblo. And so the main watershed is in the Valles Caldera National Preserve and the San Pedro Wilderness in the Nacimiento Mountains. And so you have this different land management happening from different federal agencies. And as I stated earlier, we've got many thousands of recreationalists enjoying the mountains, and you've got your ranchers with cattle, we need these waters protected, not only for ourselves but for wildlife, for all humanity. If we don't protect our waters, we're putting ourselves in a situation where, if our waters are really polluted, then, we'll be looking back and saying, why didn't we do that? Why didn't we put the effort in to protect our waters? It's a very important issue that we're facing today. Tribal people across the United States, and all peoples, we seem to kind of have missed the point in being human and being connected to Mother Earth. I think today our priorities are business and making money. But, I hope that eventually we come to our senses and start protecting what is important for all life.
Right. Cliff, in our final minute here, what happens next with this lawsuit?
Well, there have been a number of similar lawsuits filed across the country, including a lawsuit by the Navajo Nation, a lawsuit involving tribes in Arizona and state of Washington. What we have seen is that the new Biden Department of Justice has sought to seek a stay of that litigation. And maybe that's something that we would consider as well. But we're also very concerned about protection of water in New Mexico right now. And we really need to think about how we begin doing that. The Biden administration on day one of the inauguration signaled an interest in reconsidering and possibly repealing the Trump rule. And we would love to see that. But that process takes time. It could take a matter of years to go through the formal rulemaking process. So one thing that our litigation is asking for is just vacate the rule. Just take us back to where we were before. At that point, the Pueblo of Jemez, the Pueblo of Laguna can make the arguments exactly as Chris is saying about why it's so important to protect their waters right now. We need a new rule, and everybody agrees that we do need a new rule going forward. But while that rulemaking process is continuing, we would really like to stop the effectiveness of this rule that just eliminates protection for so much of New Mexico's waters.
Right. Cliff Villa, Chris Toia, thank you so much for joining us on New Mexico in Focus today.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Watching social media and press, it's been fascinating to see how many people are ready, willing, and able to keep donning a mask in public. Perhaps a small percentage are folks now habituated to wearing one, but a good number mention not having a cold or flu in some time. That's hard to argue. Now, how long it lasts, as the panel mused earlier, is anyone's guess. For me, the mask is still in the pocket if my plan includes being indoors, especially if there are seniors in close proximity. I like to ask if folks might be more comfortable if I also wear a mask. Now, most say no, but I want the option out of courtesy. Now, have you settled on a personal mask protocol? If you have chosen to stay the course or have said goodbye to any and all mask wearing, let us know over at the Focus on New Mexico Facebook page. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks again for joining us, for staying informed and engaged. We'll see you again next week in Focus.
Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by the McCune Charitable Foundation and viewers like you.